Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast, and I'm so excited again to have another amazing guest. We have Samantha Sund. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I've been trying to book her for a few months now, and we finally landed her. So I'm excited to have her on. She has an amazing story. I've known Sam now for probably going on 4 years. And I met her at Wasatch Recovery, and she's got an amazing story. I do have to give thanks to our sponsor, Veracity Networks, and Drew Peterson for making that sponsorship possible. They're an amazing company that's allowing me to get this podcast, this Belief Cast, out to more people. And I'm excited because a lot of people are going to hear your story, Sam, and they're going to be blown away. And you're doing such amazing things right now. If they only knew. But here we go. We're going to share your story. So, again, welcome and thanks for being on.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
You bet. So let's just start from the beginning a little bit here. Tell us a little bit about you and your family and where you grew up and kind of go from there.
Okay. So I am originally from Evanston, Wyoming.
Okay.
Born and raised. Super small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, really small town.
Very
Nothing
small,
much
yeah.
to do there. But I have my mom, my dad. I've got 2 older sisters, and then I have a little brother.
Okay.
He just graduated high school yesterday.
Oh, right
so
on.
super exciting.
Yeah.
But I grew up there. I've always been like super outdoorsy, fun stuff like
Right.
that. That's kind of what I grew up doing. I mean, when you're in a small town, there's not much else to do, right?
So let's go outdoors,
yeah,
right?
outdoors.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it? I mean, did you
Yeah.
like it? Or did you ever wish, I wish I was in a bigger city? Or did you not even think of that?
I mean, I feel like it can go either way. I feel like people in a small town always want to live in a city, and sometimes people in a city always want to live in a small town.
Right.
But I kind of always wanted to eventually get out of that town.
Right.
But, I mean, now, but.
Yeah. Does your family still live up there, or your parents, or?
No. So my dad has actually worked in Salt Lake for quite some time since I was like in middle school.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So he commuted for many years.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, when me and my sister were in treatment, they picked up and moved down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I remember that now.
Yeah. So it kind of gave them the final push that they needed to
Yeah.
get out of that
be close
town.
to you guys while you're going through what you were going through.
Yeah.
Plus, he worked down here, so it made sense.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
now we're all down here, which is crazy, but yeah, we're
Yeah.
all in Salt Lake.
Yeah. So, growing up in Evanston, other than the outdoor stuff, what did you do like in school and high school and things like that? Were you involved at all with anything outside of, the stuff we're going to talk about?
I was really involved with dance ever since I was a really little girl. That was something throughout everything, I was always super, super passionate about. So I was really involved with that. I was on the high school dance team. I had a lot of good friends growing up that we all lived on the same street.
Yeah.
And then once I got into high school, I kind of secluded myself a little bit more. I mean, I still had my dance girlfriends, but
Right.
definitely secluded myself a lot more throughout high school. But
Right.
yeah.
Well, and again, one of the reasons why I'm having you on today is because of, you've gone through addiction and I mean, you're lucky really to be alive, honestly.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And I know you know that.
Yeah.
Our listeners don't. And so let's talk about how that kind of started to play a role in your life and when you got started, with the drug scene, I guess is what you would say. And when did that start and how old were you?
So I grew up in a really religious family. And I don't know, I never really felt like I fit in. I never really felt like I had a place, I guess you could say.
Okay.
I always kind of felt like on the outside. And throughout my freshman year, like 8th grade, 9th grade, I really started to develop a lot of like depression, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're like that young, you don't really know what it is, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
I just kind of was like always feeling less than or not good enough or like just overwhelming feelings all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. I mean, nobody really does, truly.
Right.
But it does run in my family. And I remember always wanting something and I could never figure out what it was. And like dance gave me a little bit of that, right? So it gave me a little bit of passion and desire, but like outside of that, like I felt like I didn't have anything, you know?
Right.
And so about my freshman year, so I was probably 14, 13, wherever that is.
Yeah.
I had my first drink, and I remember the first night I drank, and I finally felt like, oh, I found it. You know, I found that one thing that was missing that I needed. I felt numb for the first time. You know, that feeling of not being good enough or self-doubt. It was just kind of suppressed, and I felt good and I felt numb, and I didn't have like this constant overwhelming anxiety or anything like that. And I was just like, oh, as the big book says, I've arrived, you know, this feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is it. I've made it. You know what I mean? Which is so funny that that's the first thing you think, but you know.
Well, like you said, as a kid struggling with anxiety and depression, not knowing what it really even is, and then you have this experience with this drink and you're like, whoa, that kind of makes me feel somewhat normal. Right. You know? Yeah. And I think a lot of people are kind of caught in that. So go from there. Let's hear what happened from that point forward. And
so from there, I mean, like I said, throughout middle school too, I just felt like the odd duckling. Like I just didn't fit. And once I started to branch out in high school and started drinking, I kind of went into a different scene, right? So I had all these really great friends growing up that were super religious as well. And obviously when I switched paths and switched friend groups and stuff, like I kind of lost that, right? Along the way, like I kind of pushed myself away from them, which granted, I probably wouldn't have wanted to be associated with myself at that point either, but it became like an obsession. So like all week I would be looking forward to the weekend so I could drink and just get trashed. And I remember like every time I would drink, it wasn't just to drink. I would drink to the point of blacking out and not knowing where I was, waking up confused. And, you know, that's not really... people that drink don't really drink just to black out every time, you know? But that was like my goal every time, was to get so drunk that I would just pass out. And it's weird that that's something that I looked forward to, because that feeling of, you know, self-doubt and emotional stress and anxiety, depression, like that was the only thing that made that feeling go away. Right. You know, and
did your parents have any idea at that time, or were you trying to hide it from them, or did they know? Or
I mean, they might have a different opinion. I felt like I hid it pretty well, but probably not. My sister's 3 years older than me. So when I started drinking, my first drink was actually with her. She was a senior. I was a freshman.
And this is Hannah.
This is my sister Hannah. Yeah. Right. And so they had kind of found out about her and what she was doing. And I feel like a lot of the focus was on her. So I kind of just kept doing my thing. Right. And as long as the focus is on her, I'm good. Right. So
I'll fly under the radar.
Yeah, I'll fly under the radar. They don't know a thing, which come to find out they probably did. Right. But I also was, throughout this like drinking and toxic lifestyle I was trying to live, I also was in a relationship all through high school and after high school for a long time, and it was very, very toxic. It just was, it kind of fueled the fire, I guess I would say. Okay. So at an early age, especially being that young, like when you're getting cheated on or like whatever, when you think it's the love of your life and it crushes you, and like normal people would be like, you know, I'm done, I'm breaking up with you, like you're out of my life, like, and cut people and immediately recognize like red flags all over the place, right? But instead I would question like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what do I need to fix? Instead of being like, what is your problem? Like, this isn't you, this isn't your fault. But that's how I was, like, all growing up, just like, what did I do wrong? Like, and just immediate self-doubt of like, it must be me, you know, and no other outside source. So that also played a role in my drinking. And I remember I'd get so trashed and just black out that they would end up having to call him or a friend to come get me, because I got to the point where people didn't know what to do with me. Oh, wow. Like if I'd pass out or something, they were just like, well, what do we do? Like, we can't leave her here. We can't take her home. We can't, like, we don't know what to do. Or my sister would have to come like save me or whatever it was, you know? And pretty soon that whole, this is it, I found it, kind of dies.
Yeah,
right.
right.
And eventually I felt like I needed something more.
Yeah.
And I started getting into more of a party scene and dabbled with cocaine. And that's, again, I got that feeling of, oh, this is it. This isn't the alcohol that was it. Like, I finally found
Like,
what I
wow,
want.
what's this stuff?
Yeah.
Right.
What's this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But so it was kind of like here and there. I started getting into like the huge rave scene down here.
Mm-hmm.
I know I look back on it now. It's so embarrassing, but it's fine.
Well, is this still high school?
Yep.
Okay.
So
yeah.
right. So throughout high school, I would come down here because, I mean, there's nothing in a small town. So I was down here all the time.
Oh, okay.
And then I got into acid, ecstasy, like all just those super party drugs. And that also became like just chasing that next high and just wanting something more every time. And pretty soon that became not enough for me anymore. And it became really frustrating because I'm like, no, like this makes me feel good. But then when that feeling would die, I'd be so confused. Like, this has been working for me for so long.
Right.
And so throughout high school, that's just kind of what I did. Every time I drank to black out. Every time I did drugs to get as high as possible. Right. And I pushed away from a lot of my really good friends and clung to my significant other that was not good for me.
Right. The toxic person.
No matter how much my friends tried to say, like, are you blind?
Yeah,
like, what's going on? And,
yeah.
I just gravitated towards this toxic, like, super dependable relationship and blocked everybody out and continued to do what I was doing.
Right.
I didn't want to listen to anybody.
Yeah.
And the more and more strict that my parents got, the more I was like, I'm going the other way.
Right.
Which is not their fault by any means. But,
yeah, they're trying to stop this.
Yeah.
And you're like, well.
But I was in that mindset of like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And I'm on my own, And
did you find yourself through this high school experience going through all this? Did you still feel depressed? And, maybe especially when you weren't doing those things, did you feel like, again, that less than feeling and, life's hard, life sucks. Like you said, I can't wait for the weekend so I can get out of here. And
yeah, no, for sure. I honestly, like, if I wouldn't have been on my dance team and still had that little piece of something that I loved, I don't know if I would have made it through high school, in all honesty.
Really?
Just because that was the only thing that kept me going to school and kept my grades up, was because I couldn't dance if I didn't get good grades.
Okay.
So it was like, I feel like if I wouldn't have had that one passion throughout high school, I would have been doomed a long time ago. But I still, throughout the whole experience, my depression got worse. And then I was on like 3 different types of medications, and I didn't even know what they did or if they were even helping, because I didn't obviously see a change, And then I'd have those like glimmering thoughts of like, if I was gone, would anybody even miss me?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
I know other people have felt like that, where it's just like, it's a terrible place to be in, but like the thoughts come by of just like, is it even worth it? Like, I don't feel good enough. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. I don't have my place. I've distanced myself from all my friends. I'm completely codependent on one person that I can't seem to cut from my life, So it was just like spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. And my senior year, excuse me, I ended up having like a hip injury in dance. And of course the first thing they gave me was Lortab. And after doing all these party drugs and drinking for so long, I got the taste of opiates, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't want to have these crazy party drugs where I feel like super high all the time. I love how I feel low and really numb, and I didn't have even that. It was like a week that I was on those. Like, it wasn't even that long, but it was really bad. And I got that taste, and I felt like that's all I wanted anymore. I didn't want the drinking. I didn't want anything else. Like, that's what I wanted. That's what did the trick for me. And my boyfriend and my sister at the time were doing heroin, which I knew, and I kind of fought about it all the time. Here I am doing every other drug, but that one is off limits.
I'm not going to do that one.
I'm not going to do that one, but
I'm above that one.
Yeah, I'm not as bad as you guys, because you guys are doing this. And so I eventually obviously got involved in that scene. And
was this after high school when you started doing heroin?
this was about a month before I graduated.
Okay, so still end of senior year.
End of senior year.
Okay.
And luckily, like, my dance career was over, so that really set in too.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, now what do I want to do, right?
Yeah, who am I now?
Yeah, because everyone expects you to have your life planned out, and that's just not how it goes.
Yeah.
And I didn't have money to go to school. I didn't have, I tried out for dance scholarships and applied to Weber State. I was planning because I wanted to get out of Evanston. I knew if I stayed there, like, I was going to get in trouble.
Right.
I knew that things weren't going to go well for me if I didn't get out. And I justified that, like, oh, like, my drug problem's not going to follow me, or my alcohol problems aren't going to follow me.
I'll leave that all behind.
Yeah. If I just get up and leave, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I remember everyone just putting so much pressure, like, well, what are you going to do? Oh, well, you should work and save up for school and then go to school. And it just was, like, so overwhelming. And again, that, like, depression and anxiety just went, like, in full force. Just like, I have nothing left. Everyone has their life planned out. Everybody's going their separate ways. I'm stuck here. I can't get out of here.
Yeah.
So then I just felt more stuck than anything. And the depression, everything just kind of took over, which was really hard and a really, like, dark time in my life. And that's when right after I graduated, I dove more into heroin. And, within it didn't even take, like, more than a few weeks for me to already feel the physical withdrawals from it.
Wow.
Because I was doing it every day, and it just was because of that overwhelming feeling of self-doubt and, like, being stuck in my depression. Like, that was the only thing that made it just, like, calm down for a minute.
Right.
And calm my head down, because my head just, like, goes crazy when I get in those moments. It won't stop, and that was the only thing that would stop it. And
so real quick, do your parents at this point know that there's an issue going on here with you? I mean,
again, I think I hit it really well, but I didn't. My mom definitely didn't.
Okay.
My mom's always kind of been, I think, not necessarily oblivious, but even if there was something really bad, I think it's hard for her to, like, realize, like, no,
almost
she would never be like,
even think that, because I don't want it to be true.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I think a lot of parents do that, where they're like, oh, I know there's something going on, but I don't want to know, because if I don't know, then it won't be as bad.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
That's her to a T. Just like, I know there's something wrong, but I'm too afraid to ask, because maybe I won't want to know the answer. Right. But my dad definitely knew. Yeah. He thought it could have been, like, weed or maybe pills. He just knew that I wasn't myself.
Right. Okay.
And I never really got into marijuana at all, just because I was on the dance team and we got drug tested. So I would do the drugs that would get out of your system really quickly. Yeah. So that was never my thing. I did it here and there. If it was in front of me, I was kind of like the garbage disposal, that anything you put in front of me, I will just, take in. But that was one thing that I tried to, like, stay away from, and I didn't like it. I liked getting as blacked out as possible. You can't really do that with that drug. Right, so it's like, that wasn't for me. But I remember that summer when I was in, like, full force of using every single day, all day, withdrawing terrible if I didn't have my fix every day. I remember one of the days I fell asleep at my parents' house in front of one of those portable, like, heater things. Because I was cold, because I was withdrawing and I was freezing. And I remember curling up next to it with my arms in front of it, and I just passed out because I had done heroin right before, and so it made me pass out. And I remember waking up and I had bubbles on my arm. Like, I was literally blistering from being heat. So close to the heater.
Oh, wow.
And, like, cooking my arm, basically. And I was so out of it that I didn't feel it.
Right.
And I remember waking up, I was, like, having a dream that something was, like, biting me or something. And that's what it took for me to, like, wake up out of it and look down, and I had blisters, like, all over my arm. And I remember my dad the next day was like, you were that asleep to not realize that you were in front of a heater and your arm was getting cooked. Yeah. And that was, like, when I knew, like, oh crap, like, he knows something is going on, obviously, right? Yeah. Because normal people would wake up during
Yeah,
that.
like, ow, this
Yeah,
is
like,
hurting,
this is
but
really
you
hurt.
slept through it.
Yeah, so that was like my first indication that like he knew, because he
Yeah.
gave me this look like there's no way that
Yeah.
this is happening. Like something is going on with you. And so that kind of freaked me out, because I was like, oh no, like I shouldn't have done that, because I had to like have them help me like bandage my arm up, and it was terrible. And yeah, so that was my first indicator.
Okay.
But again, my mom was kind of
Right.
not really,
Okay.
you know, even if
Wow.
my dad suggested it, she would probably be like, no, there's no way. But yeah, so throughout that summer, that's what I did all day, every day. And we were down here like every day, because that's where we would get everything
Get all
from.
your stuff from. And
slowly I started to get into that lifestyle of lying to everybody I know, you know, stealing, doing things you always say like, I would never do that.
yeah.
And then you get to that point, and then you're like, oh, well, I would never do that. And it just like that boundary keeps getting pushed
pushed
and
out,
pushed.
yeah.
Until finally I was like, what am I doing? And I remember towards the end of my using, my brother had this little stash of money that he would save from like mowing lawns or whatever it was in his like sock drawer. And I was fiending so bad, and I was withdrawing so bad, and I needed my fix. And I remember I went downstairs into his bedroom, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take this 20. I'm going to replace it though. Like I feel terrible about this, but I'm going to replace it. Like I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. Like,
Right.
I'd already been stealing things anyway for my fix. So it's like, and I remember I walked out, got into the car, and was starting to drive away. And I just like burst into tears, because I was like,
wow.
because my little brother was like super special to me. And for
Right.
me to like get down to that point of
Stealing
from him, like the one person who works really hard, he's like this 10-year-old kid, right? And I'm like stealing from his like hard-earned saved money.
Right.
Like, what am I doing?
Wow.
And I had stolen from like worse people, but that was the one that was like,
that hits you the most.
yeah, it just made me realize like I was in a really bad place where I didn't expect myself to end up, right? But it was over Thanksgiving, and this story is always hard for me to talk about, but me and my sister at this point were full-blown heroin addicts, and thank God we never used needles, because I don't think either of us would have been here if that was the case.
Yeah, wouldn't have made it.
But me and her, we'd see each other every day because we'd pick up from the same people, or there's kind of like this group that obviously who uses in Evanston, who doesn't. And I remember we'd see each other every day, and we hated each other. And me and my sister had always been really close, and we just absolutely hated each other. We didn't want anything to do with each other, just because the dynamic was like, no, this is my stuff, not your stuff. Like, you can get your own stuff. Like, it just became this like super toxic, addiction.
Right.
And I remember our relationship just completely diminished during all of it. And over Thanksgiving, we went out to Colorado for my dad's side of the family lives out there. So we were going out there for Thanksgiving. And I remember we were both just not wanting to go, because like we didn't have enough money to buy enough to last us this whole trip. Right. And so I'm like, no, you're not touching what I brought, because like you need to bring your own stuff. And I remember she was like, no, I'm going to quit. So she took it to Suboxone right before, was like, I'm going to quit while we're on this trip. And I'm like, oh, okay, have fun with that.
Good
right.
luck with that one.
Like,
right. Yeah.
I'm not, I brought stuff. And I remember she started to withdraw really bad. And she was like 90 pounds at this point, like 89, 90 pounds.
Jeez.
Just teeny tiny. And she has like severe asthma. And throughout the night, she couldn't breathe, because her body just physically could not handle the withdrawals anymore.
Right.
So my parents took her to the hospital in Boulder, and they couldn't figure out what it was. They were like, is it an asthma attack? Is it like, we don't understand, like your kidneys are shutting down? Like they just like could not figure out what it was. But of course she wasn't being honest
about it. Yeah.
because my mom was with her the whole time. So she's not going to admit that she's a heroin addict in front of my mom, who has no clue. And I remember waking up the next morning because we were supposed to leave the next morning. And I thought that she would just get like an asthma treatment and then we were on our way home because I was out of my stuff. So it was time to go home because I was out of my stash for the time, right? And I remember waking up the next morning and I was like, okay, so are we ready to go? My dad's like, no, we almost lost your sister in the middle of the night. Like, she's in the ICU. Like, she's hanging on by a thread. Like, we need to go down there.
Oh, wow.
And I just, like, my heart sank. Like, oh my gosh. Because, you know, you never really wake up till something like that happens, really.
Yeah.
And I remember telling him, like, you got to get me to the hospital right now. And he didn't understand what the rush was. He's like, no, they're taking good care of her. We'll go down there, like, in a few hours. I'm like, no, you need to take me right now. Because, like, I needed to tell the doctors what was going on because she wasn't being honest and they couldn't help her because, like, they had no clue. Damn. And I remember going down there and I pulled the doctor and the nurse aside, and my mom and dad were kind of like, what is going on? Like, why is she pulling the doctor and the nurse away? And I told them, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, we've been giving her stuff that could be making this worse. Like,
really?
Because they did a blood test, but they obviously didn't check for that because she wasn't honest, right? And the doctor was just like, we need to tell your parents. I'm like, no, because you just need to fix her and we're going to go home because I'm out of my stuff. Like, we need to get home. And he was like, we can't, like, we need to tell them what's going on. And of course, like, in that mindset, I was like, then that means they're going to find out about me. This is going to be horrible. And the doctor's like, we're going to sit in there with you. It's going to be fine. And I was just so scared because I knew, like, the reality was going to be hitting everybody.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. And this is part of, like, what keeps me sober today is that moment. And I remember pulling my parents into the room with the doctor. And I told her, I was like, look, Hannah's a heroin addict. She's been a heroin addict for quite some time. And I just remember my mom screamed just so loud and collapsed to the floor. Like, she just didn't even know. Right. She would never expect that, right? And it just, like, tore her apart. And my dad just looked at me. My dad didn't even say anything. He just looked at me like, what? Like he couldn't even say anything, almost, just in shock. He couldn't say anything. Like, what do you say to that, right? Right. And then they're like, is this what's been going on with you? I'm like, no, not at all. Like, I tried to deny it so bad because I wanted to keep doing what I was doing. I wanted them to save my sister, but I didn't want to stop what I was doing. Like, I just did this to save her life, and that's all that I was intending to do. And so basically everybody, like, the cat's out of the bag at that point, and it crushed everyone, obviously. Right. And then I obviously had to be upfront about me because I wasn't getting a job. I was gone before they woke up, and I was back before they... or like after they'd gone to bed. Right. So they're like, something's going on with you. What are you doing? Yeah. And so they kind of found out about me at that point. And luckily, after I told the doctor, they were able to help her and get her in the condition to transport her to treatment down here. And of course, this whole time I'm withdrawing. It's terrible. Yeah. And of course, I'm getting like the blunt end of it. Like, Hannah's in a hospital bed. Everyone's like really worried about her. Like, we just want her to be okay. We need you to save her life. And everyone's like, kind of like to me, like, oh, you're the piece of shit that's like, you know, like it all kind of came down on me, which at that point, I mean, I totally deserved it. At that time, I was like feeling totally like a victim. At the time, you're like, come on. I know. I'm like, it's her too, just because she's in the hospital, right? Yeah, right. I was in a terrible mindset at that point, but I remember when they first went in there to tell her, like, we know about the heroin, and she was hooked up to all these machines and everything. And the only thing she did was lift up her hand and point to me. And like her too. Really? And I was so mad. We joke about it all the time now because I was like, I save your life, you throw me under the bus. I was like, right. So at the time, I just was so upset. For the time, you were probably really upset. Yeah. And everyone in the room knew why she was pointing at you. Yeah. Wow. So it was a really rude awakening. And we joke about it all the time because I was like, I saved your life. And immediately you just threw me under the bus and didn't help me at all get through it. Right. And, but yeah, she ended up coming straight from Colorado to treatment. And, after we drove straight through Evanston. We didn't stop because we're like, my parents were like, if we stop, she's going to take off. We need to just drive her straight down here to treatment.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember driving home after that and waking up the next day, and my sister, oldest sister, and her husband, and my parents and my little brother on the couch in the morning when I came out. And I was like, oh no, intervention time. Yeah. Because like now that we've dealt with Hannah, what are we going to do with you?
Yeah.
And they didn't really know how bad it was. They were like, maybe we should try to take you to therapy. And, you know, because I hid it. I mean,
Right,
I like
yeah.
to say that I hid it, but like, I don't think they really knew the magnitude of
Yeah, they knew something was
where
going
I
on,
was
but they just
at.
didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because I didn't end up in a hospital bed, they were like,
Right.
maybe you just need some therapy. But they didn't know anything about recovery, or like, they didn't know anything about addiction really, you know? And I remember I just took off. I was like, I'm not doing this. Like, I don't need therapy. You know, I was super against therapy. Like, I've never been an open person at all. And to open up about super sensitive stuff or like my depression, like that's what kept me in that spot for so long, is because I never talked about it.
Right.
That's how I've been my whole life. Like, I've been a hard shell to crack for sure. And so I'm like, I am not about to sit and tell somebody about my feelings when like I could be getting high right now.
Right. How old are you at this point?
I was 18.
18. Okay.
Yeah. So after that, my sister was in treatment. I took off. I went with my boyfriend. We were kind of couch surfing different places. So we're kind of homeless, just like.
So when you say take off, you left basically kind of the family for a while.
Yeah. So I just was like, I can't deal with you. And like my family at that point made me super anxious too. Because, like, I don't know what to do. They're super religious people. They just found out, like, the most horrible thing about their daughter. Like, I already felt, like, super less than anyway. But then finding out about that, I even felt worse about myself.
Yeah.
And, like, where I had put myself and the relationships I had ruined along the way. And the trust that was out the window. So I already felt, like, weird around them and not okay.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I just felt like a terrible person. And I didn't want to feel like that, you know. And so I took off for about a month. And they shut off my phone and everything. And so honestly, like my parents didn't know if I was okay or anything. And I was still in Evanston, but like I was just crashing from place to place. And, I remember one of the nights, like the night before, I called my dad, or I called my mom, and I was literally taking a hit of heroin, just bawling, but I was still doing it.
Right.
But I was just bawling while I was doing it. And I was like, what is my problem? Like, this is making you feel so terrible what you're doing. And yet you can't put it down. And that's where I kind of realized, like, I need help, you know, because I never really understood help. I thought treatment was stupid. I didn't understand it, you know, like I just was like, the idea of like AA or like anything like that in my hometown is like a sketchy trailer park meeting with a bunch of meth heads walking in. So I just was like, this is not for me. And so I remember that night, I just kind of was like, I need help. Like, just, I can't even sit here. I'm doing drugs, but bawling at the same time, figuring out why I'm still doing it. Like, I just could not, it just was boggling my mind that I couldn't stop. And I remember calling my mom and just telling her, like, look, I need help. Like, I have nowhere else to go. And, you know, at this point I had burned every bridge of multiple friends that let me stay with them. And they were like, no, like, you're not having that stuff in my house. And then they'd welcome me into their home. They'd find out what was really happening. And then they'd kick me to the curb.
Get out.
Yeah. So at that point I'd ruined even more relationships. So that depression, everything else, like the only thing that made me feel even remotely okay was doing drugs. And, I remember that call, she was like, you're only allowed to come home if you go to treatment. Like, you're not staying in this house.
Right.
Like, as long as you are committed to go.
Committing to doing it.
And at that point, like, I didn't have anywhere else to go. And so, and I knew I needed help, but I kind of didn't really realize what I was saying yes to, you know?
Right.
Like, I knew I needed it, but like, I don't know if I should fully commit yet.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I was like, okay, like, I'll do it, whatever you want. And I came home, and the next couple days were so rough because I would take off like throughout the day. And my mom at this point had to quit her job. because
really?
it was just so overwhelming for
For
her
her, yeah.
while my sister was in treatment and dealing with it and not knowing where I was or if I was alive or whatever. And so she was home all day, which I didn't know that. So like when I went home, I just thought I'd have the house to myself. And
You're like, what are you doing
yeah,
here?
like, wait, I thought I was here by myself.
Right.
And yeah, the next couple days were rough. And I remember the last time I took off and then came home, my dad's truck was running with suitcases in the back, and they were like, we're taking you tonight. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, no,
You're like, no.
and this was like a few days before Christmas,
Okay.
in December of 2012. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. Like, we have to stay a couple more days. My birthday's January 1st. So I was like, I got to celebrate my birthday. They're like,
Right.
celebrate what birthday? What Christmas? Like,
Yeah.
your sister's in treatment and like our family is
And
not
you're dying.
good. Yeah. Like,
You know.
you look terrible. Like, what do you mean? But, you know, I think that reality set in, like, wasn't going to get high anymore. And I think it just scared me. And
Right.
that's when I came to Wasatch. They drove me down to Salt Lake. We stayed at my grandparents' house, and I was a mess all night. I just was like, because not only was I being taken away from the drug, I was being taken away from my like super codependent relationship that I was like, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah.
it just was horrible. And the next day we came to Wasatch Recovery, and
Mhm.
Mark
Right.
was here because they did a special occasion for me to admit me on a Saturday, because they were like, she won't make it till Monday. Like, you need to come in on
like,
a Saturday.
we need her in now.
Yeah. And I remember they left me in the room with Mark, and we kind of fought a little bit back and forth. I'm like, I'm not staying here. They're like, well, it's either here or you're out on the streets. Like, you're not coming home with
take
us
your
anymore.
pick.
We're not doing this anymore. And finally, when they convinced me to stay, they shut me in the office with Mark. And he's like, so they said 30 days, but I'm going to put you down for 45. I think you're going to need at least 45 days.
Right.
And I snapped at him. I was like, you better put 30 on that paper because I'm out of here at 30 days. Like,
Right.
I'm going to be here for 30 days. I just need to clean up a little bit, and then I'm out of
Right.
here. And 90 days later, almost, I was still
Wow.
here.
Still here.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, at that point, like, I was at such a low point. Like, my hair was falling out. My skin was gray. Like, I just looked horrible. And here I am thinking, like, I look okay. But after 30 days, like, you know, the light started to come back on, and the fog started to go away. And that feeling of, like, I mean, obviously my depression was still really bad, because now I had the substance taken away, and that was my, you know, my blanket for so long of like numbing myself.
Right.
And now I kind of had to feel, and I had to feel all those feelings. And my relationship with my family was a struggle.
Yeah, sure.
Just because, like, what do you say to them? Like, besides sorry, like, sorry's not gonna, you know,
Sorry, not
like,
gonna do it.
yeah, there's nothing you can really say other than prove it and do it.
Right.
And, you know, prove and get their trust back. And we did one family therapy session.
Okay.
And it was a total nightmare. Dave was my therapist.
Okay.
And I'll joke, because I'm sure my sister's gonna listen to this, but I joke, my older sister, Serena is her name.
Okay.
She's been like a perfect child, never done anything wrong. And then there's like me and Hannah, who just like ruined it. And I remember she was in town for Christmas, and so they came. My parents were supposed to come for a therapy session, but they brought her, and I was like, oh no, this is not going to be good. Like, I already knew when she walked in, because I was not expecting her. I was like, this is going to be ugly. I just know.
Right.
And I give her so much crap about it now. But I remember I wasn't talking, because like I didn't know what to say, right? And I remember Dave was like, why aren't you talking? Are you afraid you're going to like disappoint them? And she just snapped and was like, well, you can't really disappoint them more than you already have, so you might as well just say something. And I just like looked at Dave, and he was like, get out. And he kicked me out, and he did the session without me.
Really?
Because it was just like, he knew this is not going to go well.
This is not going to be good.
Yeah. And I give her crap about it, because at the time I was like, oh, I'm such a victim. And I, you know, but really, like, I totally deserved it. You know?
Sure.
And I was not in a good place, and not being a good daughter or sister or showing up. So like, now I understand where that feeling came from.
Right.
But now I call my sister 5 times a day. We're super close. I babysit her kids. Like, it's just 180 difference.
So amazing what you went through. So you're here almost 90 days at Wasatch recovery. And then after that, talk a little bit about, you leave here. I mean, and obviously you worked on a bunch of stuff. When you left, did you feel like you had a handle on your depression and the anxiety piece? Give us a little background on that, and then how you've, moved forward from that point.
I did, to a point. When I was here, we got taught a lot of different tools to like handle things like that. Right. Where, like I said, from a very young age, I've had this, and no one ever really told me how to deal with it. Right. I mean, it's super common, but no one ever really explains it to you. All they do is just give you medication to kind of cover it up, and not really like go down to what's really happening and like explain it to you and like give you tools to work on it. And after I left here, I felt like I had a whole book full of, just small things to do every day. Yeah. And I created a community here. I had a family here, the people I was in treatment with, because you go through hard things when you're in treatment with someone. Sure. So like it brings you close together. And after I left, I got super involved in like AA and CA, and that's where I found like a community. And because I couldn't go back to my old friends, like I wouldn't have done very well. Yeah.
I mean, as much as you want to, you realize that's not going to be the best thing for your recovery.
Yeah. And and the first like probably like 6 months or so after I left here, my family relationship was really hard. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less, just because the trust wasn't there. Every time I walked out the door, my mom was terrified because she didn't know what I was doing. Like,
Where
or I'd be like, I'm going to an AA meeting, and she's like, I don't want you associating with those types of people. Like, what could happen? Like, she just had no clue, or
you're like
no
Mom,
understanding.
I'm one of those people.
I know. I'd always have to point it out. Like, remember, your daughter is one of these people, like that you talk about. And now she like totally different about it. But
I've met your mom when you came here and shared with the whole group at Christmas time and brought gifts, and that was awesome, by the way. Well, but I got to meet your mom, so that was really
thanks.
cool.
It was. I know how it is to be in here over the holidays, so it's
it's
not fun. So I'm like, if I can give back in any way. But so after that, I created a community. I'm not super involved in like AA and CA anymore because I've built a life. I've built relationships that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. I've built a community of people that I can call no matter what time of the day, and they'll answer. Which even growing up through like high school, like, I had good friends, but like I never had relationships like I have now. Right. And I think it's because I removed that piece and brought my self-worth up so much that I can now like form relationships like that, where before I couldn't even form them because I felt so terrible about myself that like, you can't really have healthy relationships when you feel that terrible about yourself and your self-worth and is so low. There's no way to really mend that, I guess. And so I created a community. I came awesome. And worked here at Wasatch for a while, which was honestly saved my life. Yeah. Because it allowed me to like have people's eyes on me all the time. Because I was like, I can't mess up because I work here.
Yeah. It's a good motivator.
And I asked a very scary woman to sponsor me, who has just been like my rock. Right. She calls me on everything, which my mom's adorable. She's an enabler, and like I needed someone that was like very stern with me, and that's whose wedding I'm going to in Costa Rica next week.
Oh, really? Yeah. Look, good place to have a wedding. Right?
I know. Like, so exciting. It's like something like that. I formed a relationship 6.5 years ago that I'm now going to her wedding in Costa Rica. Like I just have these long lasting relationships, and I have a healthy relationship that I've been in for 2 years now, which is crazy for me because I swore off everybody, everything, like none of that, and it's just crazy, like the 180 I've done.
It is amazing. And I mean, honestly, if people could see you and what you're doing after what you had been through, it truly is a miracle, honestly. What would you say your belief system about yourself is now? I mean, because you said as you were growing up, you kind of felt less than, kind of an outcast a little bit. You didn't fit in. Right. What would you say your belief system is now?
It can still be a struggle for me. Okay. 'cause there's always that next obstacle, right? So like right now I'm at the University of Utah, the business college. So like I always get worried, like I'm not good enough to do this. Like this is really hard. But now I know how to like flip that switch and be like, no, you're killing it. You're doing good. Like just keep going. And I think the biggest thing for me and my beliefs now is just like, I've learned to not give up, which before like, I would just give up and immediately go back to that dark place.
Wow. That's awesome.
And now it's like, if I get thoughts like that, I just try to shut them down, or I voice it to my sisters who I have a really good relationship with, my parents, or whoever, I voice like, I don't feel good enough to do this, or I feel worried about this. Yeah. And now I've got like people to like build me up. So even when I still can get in that mode, I have people to lift me up today, which is crazy.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. So you're currently at school now at the business, the business program up at the University of Utah. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've been doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how to say this because I mean, I know a lot of the listeners don't know you, but it's like to see you, how happy you are and what you're doing. It's amazing. I mean, you're also into photography. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's always been like another passion of mine. I started doing that in high school. And of course, like drugs and other things took over. So I kind of didn't get involved in it. And like the past probably like 4 or 5 years, I've gotten really into it. I just shot a wedding last week. Cool. I'm shooting part of the wedding in Costa Rica.
Really?
So now I'm kind of building like a side business, I guess you would say. But it's also one of my big passions is traveling and photography. And it's cool that like I have those because I lost my passions and my everything throughout the years. And now that it's coming back, it's really cool.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I could talk to you all day. I have a couple more questions for you that if there's someone out there that's listening to your story right now and it's just like, man, I need help. I'm kind of struggling where you were at, or they have a family member or a daughter that's going through what you're going through. What advice would you give, and what could you tell them?
Ask for help. And that sounds super easy, but I mean, if you ask anybody that knows me, I am the last person to ask for help. Like I don't want to be a burden. Right. But you have to get over that and ask for help. Speak it. Even if you just say it out loud, start with saying it out loud. Like, I need help, or,
I like that.
I'm feeling these thoughts today. Like, if you say it out loud, it takes some of the power away.
Ooh, I love
what
that.
I've noticed over the years. Okay. And voicing it or reaching out to someone and saying, look, which I know it's a lot easier said than done, but starting off with saying stuff out loud and reaching out. And like I said, just don't give up, because a lot of times when you're in that place, it's easy to.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. I've never really heard it said that way. That's beautifully said. Just even say it out loud by yourself, just so you hear yourself saying it. Yeah. I need help.
You don't realize how crazy something sounds until you say it out loud.
Right.
Yeah. Like when I have all these horrible thoughts, until I said them out loud, I never realized how nuts it was for me to even be thinking those things about myself or whoever it was. But it's insane how much power can get taken away from that. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. If real quick, I mean, how long have you been clean now?
My sobriety date's December 22nd, 2012, so about 6.5 years.
Wow.
I know.
That is so cool.
It's flown by for sure.
Yeah. Well, and what I love what you said even earlier, that you're like, I mean, you did what you had to do with these programs and stuff, but now you're just out living your life. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, I deal with a lot of clients. The ultimate goal is we never want to see you again. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm glad you've even detached even from Wasatch. Not that you're, but it proves that you're actually just living your life. You're living what you should be doing.
I know. I had to get rid of my cushion. I
Your
had
cushion,
to like
the
finally become
blanket.
An adult. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been interesting. It's kind of crazy. Like even just trying to schedule this, I'm like, I have this life that I'm apparently busy, or like I'm in Greece or here. I'm like, this isn't my life. This is not supposed to be my life.
I love it.
I don't deserve it.
I know. And that was one of the things I was thinking of. Like, I thought, okay, I'll book Sam really quick. No. She's living her life. She's busy, got things going. So, it's really, really cool to see that. If there's someone out there hearing your story right now that would love to get in touch with you or ask you a question, if you're open to it, what would be a good way for them to, reach out to you?
I'm on social media.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I also am willing to provide my email.
Yeah, that'd
I don't
be
know
great.
if you.
Yes, please.
So my email is Samantha. Do you want me to spell it?
Yeah.
It's SAMANTHA.Ray, which is RAE, and dot my last name Sund SUND @gmail.com.
Great.
And I'm more than happy to answer any questions, or if they need someone to be the voice for them. I mean, many people did it for me. So
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, I have to say I'm really blown away about how well you've done. Like I said, I think I met you after you'd been probably clean close to 1.5 years, 2 years almost, and but to see how you've just stuck with it, and you really truly have had set some goals. You've moved on, and you're just doing some amazing things, and you're going to continue doing that. It's my honor to have you on this today.
Well,
and it's
thank you.
inspiring, and I hope you know how much I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you for having me. I know that this is huge. If anybody needs to hear it, I mean, having this available for people is incredible.
Yeah.
So,
right. Well,
really
thank
cool.
you so much, Sam. You're amazing, and thank you for being you and for being willing to be vulnerable and share your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, there you go, everybody. What another amazing story of overcoming some obstacles in life, and I love what you said. You learn to never give up. So chokes me up. But if you're out there and you're struggling, don't give up and do what Sam said. Say it out loud. If you're just, I need help, say it out loud, and then grab that phone, go to the next room, knock on your brother or sister's door. Hey, I need help. Will you please help me get there? And please reach out to Sam if you have any questions. She would love to do it. I know it. And you'd be inspired by her like I have been. So thank you for your time. And again, Sam, thanks so much.
Thank you.